An NFL franchise's ability to work within their salary cap is one of the most difficult parts of building a competitive roster. Knowing who to spend money on and when is crucial, and when a franchise ends up putting all their eggs in one basket, it can make or break an entire team. Today, we're going to be looking at each of the 32 NFL teams' worst contracts. First, we'll look at the NFC East, home of one of the worst contracts in the league. The New York Giants signed one of the worst contracts in the history of the NFL. After a decent 2022 season with a final record of 9-7-1, the Giants snuck into the playoffs and proved victorious in one wild-card playoff game before losing to the Eagles in the divisional round. After their single playoff victory, the Giants front office decided that Daniel Jones was their future. That offseason in 2023, Jones received a 4-year, $160 million contract with $92 million guaranteed, making him the highest-paid quarterback in the league at the time. But so far, the contract has done the opposite of paying off. Jones suffered a neck injury in 2023 that held him out of 3 games early in the season, and then suffered a torn ACL in Week 9 that resulted in him missing the rest of the season. The Giants finished the year 6-11, and in the games that Daniels did play in, well, he didn't look like an MVP, but rather a giant mistake. Since signing that record-breaking contract, Jones has thrown 3 more touchdown passes, 3 pick sixes, to opposing defenses than to his own team, 2. And the money wasted on him has led to the eventual dismissal of their superstar running back Saquon Barkley. After a Week 1 performance against the Vikings with 0 touchdowns and 2 interceptions, the future doesn't look bright for Jones and the Giants. The Dallas Cowboys seem to have signed their worst contract to a player holding the same position, Dak Prescott. In each of the 5 seasons, Prescott and the Cowboys reached the playoffs. The team has failed to make a single conference championship. Despite this, Jerry Jones and the Cowboys decided it would be a smart move to make Prescott the highest-paid player in NFL history in 2024 with a 4-year, $240 million contract. Not only has the former Mississippi State quarterback not won a Super Bowl, but he also hasn't even appeared in the big game. If Dallas doesn't acquire some rings within the next 4 years and break their playoff curse, this could go down as one of the worst contracts ever. Next is the Philadelphia Eagles. While they have built a pretty impressive roster and managed to do just fine in the regular season and postseason, they may have made a minor slip-up in their secondary. After James Bradberry's breakout All-Pro season in 2022, the Eagles decided to sign him to a 3-year, $38 million deal. In 2023, Bradberry proved that Philadelphia had just signed one of their worst contracts in recent memory. The cornerback allowed 7 touchdowns and grabbed just 1 interception while allowing 40 completions on 65 targets. Even if the Eagles wanted to move on from Bradberry this past offseason, they would have taken a hit of over $15 million. Any Philly fans here? What went wrong with Bradberry? To finish the NFC East, we have the Washington Commanders. Although they haven't spent a crazy amount of money on any specific player and don't necessarily have what I would consider a bad contract, they might be holding themselves back by spending $24 million on Terry McLaurin this season. While McLaurin is incredibly consistent and certainly a valuable asset to the franchise, the Commanders could be using that money to address a plethora of other issues and build other areas of the roster that desperately need improvement. Mind you, with cap space to spare and not many big money deals on the table, it's hard to be critical of Washington's deals right now. Now we'll move on to the NFC South, widely regarded as one of the worst conferences in the NFL. The Carolina Panthers certainly made this one easy to choose with a 4-year, $25.4 million contract to former Eagles running back Miles Sanders. After a 1,000-yard rushing season with the Eagles in 2022, Sanders turned into a complete bust in his first season in Carolina. Not only did he rush for only 432 yards on the season, but he also lost the starting job to Chuba Hubbard in the process. I'm sure David Tepper's throwing a beer at someone somewhere for this one. The New Orleans Saints' worst contract goes to quarterback Derek Carr. While Carr has had some great years with the Raiders and looked like a solid quarterback against a weak Carolina defense in Week 1, his first year in New Orleans was incredibly underwhelming. Carr led the Saints to a winning season, finishing 9-8 on the year, but it wasn't enough to secure a spot as a wildcard team. His 4-year deal, worth up to $150 million, could be a complete bust if the Saints don't find a way to make the postseason soon. soon. We're still not sure what the Atlanta Falcons were thinking when they drafted Michael Penix Jr. this offseason. Sure, it's a good idea to have a guy like Penix sit and learn under Kirk Cousins for a couple of years before Cousins hits retirement, but it's still an odd move. The Falcons signed Cousins to a 4-year, $180 million deal, so it doesn't seem like they're going to be needing a new quarterback anytime soon. And yes, you heard that right. The Falcons signed a 36-year-old quarterback to a 4-year deal. Kirk and the Atlanta offense better have some immediate success if this contract's ever going to look good. The last of the division is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The Bucs have done a solid job at compiling a competitive roster and proved it last year with a playoff win against the Philadelphia Eagles. The sketchiest contract they have was revealed in August 2024 when Tampa decided to sign offensive tackle Tristan Wirfs to a 5-year, $140 million contract, making him the highest-paid offensive lineman in NFL history. Wirfs will need to keep up the same elite level of play for the next few years if this contract is going to pay off. But for their roster overall, well done to the Bucs front office. I'm not saying he's not worth it, it's just tricky to find a bad deal with the Bucs, and Wirfs' contract makes their life difficult elsewhere on the roster. Next up is the NFC North. The Chicago Bears signed linebacker Tremaine Edmunds to a contract before the 2023 season, averaging $18 million a year. Edmunds had a great 2022 season with the Bills, but took a step back in 2023 with the Bears. The Minnesota Vikings don't necessarily have a terrible contract, but they did screw up their signing of Shaquille Griffin. According to Pro Football Network, Minnesota's Griffin addition appears to have canceled out one of the third-round compensatory picks the Vikings were in line to receive due to the free agent losses of quarterback Kirk Cousins and edge Daniel Hunter. Had Minnesota waited until after May 1st, it could have signed Griffin without risking its comp selections. The Green Bay Packers made Jair Alexander one of the highest-paid cornerbacks in the NFL when they signed him to a 4-year, $84 million contract in September 2024. While he is incredibly talented and a valuable asset when on the field, he only played 7 games in 2023, and any more injuries could really hurt his Packers defense and make his contract look like a complete waste. Next is the Detroit Lions, who signed Emmanuel Mosley to a contract extension this offseason. While his contract is only worth $3 million, the cornerback only played 2 snaps last season before tearing his ACL, and in 2022, he only played 5 games due to an ACL tear as well. Mosley, unfortunately, has a brutal track record with injuries, and would you look at that, he's on IR again this year. Next up is the NFC West, where we'll start with the LA Rams. Their roster has generally been well put together, so the worst contract to me looks like Joseph Noteboom, who signed a 3-year, $40 million deal in 2022. The Rams signed him to that deal to make him a starter at tackle, but inconsistent play has led him to become more of a reserve option. They restructured his deal this offseason to reduce his cap hit, and at one point it looked like his roster spot was in jeopardy. Next, the Seattle Seahawks re-signed Leonard Williams to a 3-year deal worth over $20 million annually, making him one of the highest-paid defensive tackles in the NFL. While Leonard is a powerful force on the defensive line, his price tag puts him in the same conversation as guys like Christian Wilkins of the Las Vegas Raiders and Nnamdi Madubuike of the Baltimore Ravens. But Williams is nowhere close to them in terms of skill and production. This offseason, the Arizona Cardinals signed former Bears defensive lineman Justin Jones to a 3-year, $31.2 million deal. Jones is 28 and signed for a high price to a team that doesn't look quite ready to compete in the playoffs. This contract could end up being a waste of money for a team that should be building a roster of young players ready to compete a few years down the road. The last team for the NFC is the San Francisco 49ers, and it makes sense because we saved the best for last. San Francisco doesn't have too many regrettable contracts and has found a way to absolutely load their roster with talent. The cherry on top is quarterback Brock Purdy, who will probably sign a huge extension once his current contract expires. But in 2024, he will only cost the 49ers a little over $900,000, one of the best bargains in the entire league. Now moving on to the AFC. We'll start with the AFC North. The worst contract in this division, and potentially the very worst of all time, was awarded by the Cleveland Browns, who signed controversial quarterback Deshaun Watson to a 5-year, $230 million deal. Just a few seasons ago, Watson was one of the best quarterbacks in the entire league. He made 3 straight Pro Bowls from 2018 to 2020 and was the NFL passing yards leader in 2020. When the Browns signed Watson before the 2022 season and made him the highest paid player in the NFL at the time, they thought they were signing the league's next MVP. Flash forward to 2024, and Watson is looking like one of the worst starting quarterbacks in the league with a declining set of skills and a whopping $72.9 million cap hit in each of the next 2 years. In Week 1 of 2024, in the Browns' 33-17 loss to the Cowboys, the former Clemson quarterback was 0 for 10 on passes of 15 or more yards downfield and 0 for 4 on passes of 20 or more yards downfield. He finished the loss with under 170 passing yards and 2 interceptions. Ouch! How do you feel about this one, Browns fans? The Steelers haven't made any mistakes that necessarily stand out in building their roster other than their 2022 contract extension of defensive lineman Larry Ogunjobi. Larry will cost the Steelers over $13 million in 2024, and he's only averaged 2.25 sacks a season during his time in Pittsburgh. The Ravens are in a similar boat, and the only concern with their salary cap is the $17 million payout they'll be handing to Ronnie Stanley, a high-quality left tackle who is 30 years old with a history of injury and missed games. To polish off the North, we have the Bengals and linebacker Logan Wilson. His 4-year, $36 million contract doesn't stand out on paper, but his numbers have declined since inking the deal. Now on to the AFC South. The Houston Texans may have overpaid running back Joe Mixon. The former Bengal is currently the 6th highest paid running back in the league. He inked a 3-year extension in this offseason and will be paid around $5 million a year until he's 31 years old. That's a lot of trust in a guy who not only plays one of the most injury-prone positions in the sport, but is already hitting an age where most backs are out of their prime. The Tennessee Titans signed cornerback Chidobe Awuzie to a 3-year deal worth almost $22 million. While it's not a deal that breaks the bank, it's certainly a lot for a guy who's their number 2 cornerback and has missed a lot of time due to injury. If Awuzie can stay on the field, this one might end up paying off. Now heading down to Jacksonville. The Jaguars may have made a huge mistake when signing quarterback Trevor Lawrence to an absolutely insane 5-year, $275 million contract. While we're now seeing a lot of huge contract extensions for quarterbacks, with guys like Joe Burrow and Jordan Love getting similar amounts, it's still an insane amount of money for a guy who has only led his team to 1 playoff victory in his career. It's hard to call this contract bad this early in his career, but if it's ever going to be worth it, Lawrence better start bringing some hardware back to Jacksonville. The Indianapolis Colts have a relatively simple pick for their worst contract with the 3-year, $42 million deal they gave to running back Jonathan Taylor. Taylor is now one of the highest paid backs in the history of the league and hasn't looked anything like the all-pro back we once saw in 2021. Granted, injuries have been a big reason why, so the pressure is on to live up to the payday now that he's healthy. Now on to the AFC East. The Miami Dolphins have done a great job managing their money and have filled their offense with elite talent at a reasonable price. The only concern is edge rusher Bradley Chubb, who will earn north of $20 million this season while still recovering from an ACL tear. Hopefully, he will return at full force, but you never know. The Buffalo Bills are in a similar situation with an aging defensive star in Von Miller, who may not be able to stay healthy through an entire season ever again and will cost the Bills just under $9 million in 2024. Next up are the New York Jets, who signed Aaron Rodgers to a 3-year, $112 million deal in 2023. While the former MVP can hopefully still play at a high level, Rodgers missed the entirety of his first season with the Jets in 2023 after an Achilles injury on the first drive of the season. His Week 1 performance in 2024 wasn't pretty, and that $112 million contract is looking more and more concerning as time passes. The Patriots also have a slightly concerning contract with wide receiver Kendrick Bourne, who just signed a 3-year deal through 2026 worth almost $20 million, but hasn't posted numbers in recent years to prove that worth. Last but not least is the AFC West. The LA Chargers and Joey Bosa agreed to a 5-year, $135 million deal a few seasons ago, and he will cost Los Angeles $26 million in the 2024 season. In the last 2 seasons with the Chargers, Bosa has only played in 14 games and has totaled just 9 sacks. If Joey can't stay on the field and be more productive, this contract is certainly not going to be worth it. The Chiefs have a bit of a puzzling contract with tight end Noah Gray. At the end of the 2024 offseason, Kansas City signed Gray to a 3-year, $19.5 million deal, with Taylor Swift's boyfriend Travis Kelce obviously still in play and former TCU tight end Jared Wiley being selected by the Chiefs in the 2024 draft. It's hard to see how this contract for Gray will pay off or why they even needed to extend him in the first place. While the Broncos are currently only only paying around $6 million for offensive tackle Mike McGlinchey, the way his contract is structured could bite them in the butt next season. McGlinchey will cost Denver almost $24 million in 2025, and so far, he hasn't looked worth it. And last, we have the Las Vegas Raiders. I honestly don't see too many contract problems on their roster, but there has been some concern about the deal made with defensive tackle Christian Wilkins. Wilkins' contract will earn him an average of $27.5 million a year for the next 4 years, and after 98 total tackles in 2022, that number fell to 65 in 2023. He is a beast, but $27.5 million a year is a lot. Tom Telesco has cleaned up the spending in Vegas. If there are any bad deals for the Silver and Black, you can credit the John Gruden and Josh McDaniels eras for that. So there you have it, the worst contracts from every team in the NFL in 2024. Which ones that I picked do you disagree with? Let me know in the comments.